That's a fantastic use case. I would take that product any day.
Have you seen any other companies in your space using generative AI and how they're using it? If you have to choose, say, like a problem statement right now, maybe like say if you would have not been working on Tensight and you are right now in this space with all this tech coming in, what would you basically choose to do then?
Welcome to Fireside Chats with 100x. In this series, we will be sitting down with founders and industry professionals from various domains. We will be exploring how generative AI can play a role in that domain and what is the future of that domain with Gen AI in the picture. From these conversations, we'll be exploring product ideas. We'll be exploring the role of a generative AI engineer and how generative AI is going to shape the landscape of the world that we are entering into.
In this episode, we have Sonu Sampadan with us, and she is the co-founder of Tenovia, and she has been in the e-commerce industry from more than 10 years. And we'll discuss the intersection of e-commerce and generative AI in this episode. Let's get started.
So I think we can start maybe with first your introduction.
I am currently the co-founder of Tenovia. So Tenovia is an e-commerce growth partner for brands. We essentially help businesses scale their e-commerce revenues and omnichannel business. I'm also the co-founder of Tensight, which is an e-commerce analytics product. Essentially, what the product does is it helps identify gaps or revenue leakages for businesses so that they can plug them and then help them get to the next level of growth through insights and recommendations. So yeah, that's essentially what I do in my day job. But otherwise, a little bit about myself. I'm not from the tech background. Like I think a lot of people in the cohort aren't techies as well. So that's a nice thing. But I come from a marketing background. I was in the digital marketing space and I was interested in the analytics space. And that's how the company essentially started to form. The Tenovia entity came about and it slowly progressed into the product version. So completely different spectrum of marketing, then came into tech, insights, analytics, and that's where we are today.
If you have to basically tell all the listeners right now, what is the problem you're currently solving with Tensight? And basically, what's your vision for this?
There are quite a few problems that we are currently solving, but if I have to specifically pick and choose problems which may make sense to the cohort, because I'm trying to make it simple, is say, for example, and this is a problem which is not apparent, right? So when you browse today on, say, a Myntra or an Amazon or any platform, you are exposed to a certain set of products which you see of the brand. Let's say you're looking at Levi's, right? The reality is that if Levi's has 500 t-shirts showing up on Myntra at any given point in time, they might actually be having 700 in the back end. When I say back end, it might be actually 700 products which are sitting in their warehouse, digitized, but for some reason it's just not exposed to the platform. And you know, in e-commerce, we use this line which is "Jo dikhta hai, wo bikta hai," which is what you see is sell. So what happens typically is that a big problem statement that brands have is they have no control today of what's the exposure of inventory or product catalog on these platforms. They have no way of real-time calculating what's the kind of loss that they're generating because of this inefficiency in the system. This is a very, very basic problem, but it is something that we are possibly the first guys solving it for a lot of brands. So essentially, what their team then gets access to is a real-time view of all the products which are actually masked or unexposed to these platforms. And their teams can then go and take action on it. Like they can go and fix that right away. And that naturally gives a bump up to business, right? It's almost, we've seen about 12 to 15% increase in revenues just by exposing this set of products, which are kind of just sitting in the warehouse and not selling essentially.
So,
And this is
like,
just one use case.
Yeah, just to like,
Yeah.
I think understand, is it a tech? Because I from maybe like what I'm looking from, is it a technical problem or is it more like a, you can say, a industrial problem? Maybe a cataloging on the site, people not able to catalog, or was it like because of the dashboard or analytics, some data is missing?
It's basically a whole bunch of problems that can possibly be the case. So we also tell them why this is happening, right? So it could be multifold. It could be that you've not cataloged or you've not digitized your catalog the right way. You might be missing certain key attributes or key features which are important on the platform. And as a result, that platform is not accepting your catalog. it's really hard for a brand which has got thousands of products to actually keep a tab of it. Somebody has to manually go and do it. So that could be one problem. Another problem is that there could be failures because you're typically having multiple middleware that the products go through. So from the stock is sitting in your warehouse, it usually goes through a middleware which will centralize all the inventory and then expose it to multiple platforms. Right? And there are gaps there itself that you would see as a result of which the inventory is not getting pushed to the platform in the right quantum. And the platform itself might have problems. We've seen this time and time again where you have stock of it in the back end, it's not sitting in the front end, right? It's not shown in the front end for whatever reason. And very often it's just a push that the brand has to do to the platforms, be it from a category manager. Typically are the people that you talk to in an Amazon or a Myntra or a Flipkart, and that problem actually gets resolved. And it's just that they get a real-time view of what we basically do is we integrate with all these touch points and we can get a real-time view of the gaps that they essentially have. So the brands are then able to see and say, hey, okay, I've lost so much of potential products from this touch point, and they can go and fix it. So yes, it's a tech solve, but it's presented through analytics so that they are able to take action on it quickly, as opposed to just a dump of data, right?
I'm assuming then you need to integrate like a lot of data from different data
Absolutely.
sources, and yeah,
Correct.
that maybe like present it in a way that maybe your team can first understand and make sense of the data, and then
Yeah.
identify where is the like bottleneck, and then you can solve that. Just before you explain that, I think because like I'm assuming a lot of audience and the folks are not like from the same background. Can we just like tell them what are the things they need to say keep in the check when somebody is starting an e-commerce business, and then what are the things which you use maybe as a data source, and how you
Got
basically
it.
fit into that entire cycle? So
I think, so let me break that question into two parts. Firstly, when you're starting an e-commerce venture, I'm guessing you're referring to, direct to customer brand, right? Like, let's say I want to start a cosmetic brand. Obviously, the first step is to get my products in place, try and understand where I'm going to sell my products, because today online you have the option of selling it on your own platform, which is what we call direct to customer, so D2C, or you have the option of selling it on marketplaces like your Amazons and the Flipkarts of the world, right? And I think while that is just a natural progression of business, you will figure out what product you want to sell, where you want to sell. The place where your analytics really comes in handy is if you maintain your data sanctity. Very often what we see is not in e-commerce per se, because e-commerce naturally forces you to have cleanliness of data, right? Or hygiene of data, because you are any which ways digitizing a lot of your products. But we've seen this in omni-channel use cases where your SKU codes or your data quality or your data standards that you maintain are not good. And that's possibly like a foundation for you to ensure that you're able to do better analytics and deeper insights on the products itself. So that's fundamental. So you have to maintain hygiene in your data quality. That's at the bare basic minimum that you need to have.
okay, so like for a brand, suppose like I want to start say a D2C company right now, like what all options do I have? Like should I directly go with the existing providers like maybe Shopify, or like if I use Shopify, like then how can Tensight help me? Or if I build my own custom solution, then where do you guys fit into the picture?
So Tensight sits above a layer of all of these, right? So yes, first question, do you want to go to Shopify? Do you want to use a Shopify, or there's a Magento? There are other platforms. The simplest way to go online is obviously using a tool or a provider like Shopify, because the platform really helps you get your products live and get your website up and running very fast, right? Without having too much of development work or too much of technology intervention. So that's the first thing that you would do. You want to get your products up. The second thing you would need to do is you need to go live on a platform like an Amazon or Flipkart, because people will start seeing you there. On your own platform, it can get expensive to market. Now, what Tensight does is we essentially provide the insights to you. So once you start generating sufficient amount of data and sufficient amount of revenues, you will then start seeing breakages. You will start seeing, hey, my inventory planning is not possible by one person because I've got 25 warehouses in the country, plus Swiggy dark stores, plus Zepto dark stores. So how do I prioritize and how do I plan my inventory forecasting? That's where we come in, right? We'll help your teams. We'll give the Tensight essentially plugs into your product data, it plugs into your sales data, it plugs into your life cycle, product life cycle and your replenishment cycles, and it can give you insights as to what's the kind of inventory you need to be keeping in each facility. So just giving you one example of where the Tensight piece would come in, right? Because these are what you need to essentially run your business, but Tensight is essentially going to help you optimize over and above what you already have.
Interesting. So I'm assuming, like, I think since you said you've been around it's more than 10
Yeah.
years. Yeah. So what was like, based on your experience, like if somebody has to start a new business today, what are the things which they can basically take care, and what could be, you can say, the best route for a beginner? Because I am assuming a lot of people who are in the cohort are in
Yeah.
the building phase right now. So either they will be like
Right.
starting their own journey, or they basically like find an idea and build on top of it. So what could be the best way for them to start something, and maybe like use also Tensight? They can be our potential customers.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So firstly, yes, you need to have an idea. And I think, I mean, this can go into a philosophical answer, but what's really important when you get to becoming an entrepreneur is the fact that it's not going to be easy. And I know a lot of the cohort, when I was looking at the mix as well, there is a fair percentage of the people who are entrepreneurs already, and there are students as well, and people who are working, right? So if you have an idea, you need to make sure that you are able to carve out, keep at least 7 to 10 years that you want to dedicate to the venture. And why I say that you need to do 7 to 10 years mindset, right? It's important that in your mind you have that you're going to have to rough it out for a long period of time, because then when crap hits the ceiling, which it will, you are better prepared. And I'm not saying that you have to rough it out for 10 years. It's just that the mindset preparation, it's just the training that you need to have in your head when you get into starting a business. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be super hard. I see a lot of people today wanting to do businesses and they start off and they give up really easy. While they have superb ideas, it's just that they don't rough it out, and business is tough. So you have to just go through the weeds, be willing to navigate through the problem statements, get really deep into the problem. And that's important, right? So that's the first thing. And the second would be just while going solo is great, it's absolutely important to find a team that can complement you. We all have strengths and weaknesses. Be very clear of where you're weak at and find talent and team members or co-founders who can back you up. I think that's so fundamental in business, which is such an underrated point of view that not many people talk about. They think that if you get funding, you're great, right? I mean, that's important. I'm not belittling that point, but it's so important to find the right mix of competencies in that equation, because then it becomes so much more easier. The journey is so much more easier. So yeah, so that's my 2 pence worth. While if
Nice.
somebody wants to
How
start off on their own,
how did you find your co-founder?
my co-founder found me rather. So
Okay.
uh, so I was always sure that I wanted to do something on my own. So in fact, before this, I was into content, right? I was into marketing and I had my own content firm. And my co-founder and I, both of us, we were friends. So what happened was that we realized that he was strong in certain areas and I come with the expertise of going really deep into problems. So problem solving is my forte, whereas critical thinking, ideation is his forte. And so it became like a good mix for us to kind of come together and try and do this, because we complement each other, and it's so important to have that equation in the team, that you should be able to complement. And I think that starts off by knowing where you're weak at. So I think that's important. You need to know where you are weak at. We often just focus on where we are very good at. We don't really think about where we are weak at. So if you're able to find that out, I think it really helps.
Now coming to the Gen AI part of things, right? Like I've been also like doing couple of research since last, I think, couple of days about where generative AI can help e-commerce. But before giving my opinion or insights on that, I want your maybe say views. Like where do you think, have you used Gen AI
Sure.
first of all, or if have you seen any other companies in your space using generative AI and how they're using it?
I think it's such an evolving space. There's so much going on every single day practically, right? So there are so many resources out there that talk to you about new models that are coming up, which help e-commerce really, really well. So I think recently something that Sid was pointing out was outfit anyone. And that's so super helpful. I mean, it's absolutely mind-blowingly useful for e-commerce. So that's a great model, right? That has a very apparent, very obvious use case where I take a product and I can outfit a model. I don't need to shoot because technically these models can only shoot around 50 products a day. Now imagine you've got 1,000 products to catalog. The amount of time and effort it takes for you to actually get the model slash the number of models that you'll have to pay for in one go. I'm not trying to disrupt that industry, but that's the problem, right? But that's just one use case of Gen AI. But if you look at it, the very obvious use cases are content generation. Because today, if you look at it, e-commerce business is entirely about what text you put, what imagery you put, right? There is no way for the customer to physically experience your product till the time the product actually gets to their house. So everything that you do to kind of create a mind share in the customer space is through text and imagery. And there's a lot of effort that the successful brands that actually put in to get that content right and get that imagery right. Now, the power of Gen AI, as we all have seen in the cohort as well, what we've seen through these models, is that process you can literally bring that content to life. And I was going through this article where China has done some virtual influencers, right? Like some company in China has got like some 1,000 plus virtual influencers. Now imagine being able to create a brand personality through whatever you've built in. So and that's the thing, right? Today we sign up with celebrities because you think that celeb stands for a certain kind of a personality, and you think your brand matches that personality and the customer will resonate with it. But if I have a virtual influencer, I mean, an influencer might not be the right word, but if I have a virtual assistant or a virtual shopper or a virtual brand face, I can create that character. I can give that personality through that avatar of sorts with the power of Gen AI, and it's so powerful. It's so the potential for that is quite significant because today a lot of problems in the e-commerce industry is retention. I am struggling to get the same customer to come back to me, right? As a brand, you spend big bucks to get the customer to transact with you the first time around, and they don't come back because they are not loyal. They've experienced you once, then maybe they don't want to come back to you again because they've got options. But how are you able to give that personalized experience to the customers so that they actually stick with you? And I think that's a huge opportunity that's out there for brands to tap into. Another very interesting use case that we are working on is actually product recommendations, which is today, for example, you can go through the reviews and ratings of platforms and try and identify products that are not there in your portfolio that you should ideally keep, which is quite useful because brands are always looking to increase their top line, right? And the one way to increase top line is by creating more products. And if you're able to give this insight to them, if you're able to make these recommendations to them basis what's happening real time, reviews and ratings, that's absolutely useful for brands. That's a very, very strong use case for brands.
Interesting. Okay, I think you mentioned about the Chinese influencer. That's also, I think, one thing we recently covered on the 100x page. So I think we made a video out of it. Like, so these are Chinese influencer. They are working 24/7. This is basically like AI agents, and you can basically do the deep fake of a particular personality, and they basically do this 24 hours, 24/7 shopping. Like how earlier it used to do live tele shopping. People used to come on television and this announce to. Now these guys are doing that continuously 24/7 using AI agents, and that is
Wow.
very crazy because
That's so cool.
I think which is like cool, also like scary at the same time. Yeah, so that's one
Trust
thing.
China to do it.
I was looking at how IKEA was doing this. Do you know about like IKEA also integrated generative AI to their
IKEA
system?
also. Correct.
Yeah, so that was
Yeah.
a very interesting, like I think solution which they have built is now you can just write a natural language. Okay, like I need like dining table like this, and they will basically generate an exact furniture which basically matches up to
Right.
your you can say request. What do you think about that? Like, do you think if somebody maybe
It's
like
super cool. Yeah.
yeah, if so, yeah, I think if somebody can take that as a problem statement in the cohort, and maybe build something around it, can they actually build a pluggable feature, maybe for these platforms like maybe Shopify or other marketplace?
Absolutely. That's like one problem statement we are trying to solve as well. So I don't know if you've seen the Amazon Bedrock video that's come out. It's actually
Yeah,
quite
yeah.
cool. So it's essentially like a chatbot assistant. So you type it into it, things like, I'm going to some place, suggest me what to wear, right? So it picks up information of the weather. It takes your past purchase. So it knows who you are, you male, female, what kind of products have you bought. And it also then makes recommendations based on the products that are available in the platform itself, right? So it's pretty cool, actually. Absolutely useful use case. I think not just in fashion, but I mean, specifically in products where there is a lot of content in cosmetics, right? See, like if you have to buy a sunscreen, you've got SPF 50, and then if you look at it, you've got retinoids, retinols, and a whole bunch of things. And there's so much of content that the consumer has to consume, but they have to read up on in order to make a choice. And if you're able to simplify that, make that as an assistant, use Gen AI, give them recommendations, and it can be enabled as a plugin, right? Because it's ultimately based on the content that's there on the platform that you already have on Shopify. Absolutely, it's a superb idea. I think it will make so much sense to customers. When I say customers, it'll make so much sense to brands, because ultimately the idea needs to have a monetary path to it. Ideas are great,
Right.
but it needs to make money ultimately at the end of the day, right?
Mm.
And I think this specific idea has the monetization capability, because you can stick it in as a plugin on Shopify. It improves the potential revenue potential for the customer, and your number of users increase, as well as like we were discussing, retention increases, right? So
Yeah.
yes, it has a path to monetization.
Yeah, if you have to choose, say, like a problem statement right now, maybe like say if you would have not been working on Tensight and you are right now in this space with all this tech coming in, what would you basically choose to do then?
So I think I come at a place of advantage because we work with customers and we are every day dealing with their problem statements. So we really know what are the pain points. I think the problem is if you don't have that view, any idea sounds like a great idea, right? And then it becomes important to put very, very strong questions to yourself to say, hey, does this really make sense? To either it has to make revenue sense or it has to make cost sense. So when I say revenue sense, either this product I'm going to build, and this is great for anyone who wants to evaluate if their idea is worth pursuing, is this product that I'm going to build going to increase number of users, which then naturally means it's going to increase my revenues, or is it going to cut my costs, or is it going to help me reduce expenditure, which are quite a chunky piece of my business today, right? If it is able to answer some of these questions, then you should go for it. You should then say, hey, I think it's worth pursuing, because it's not just a gimmick, it's not just a fad. It actually helps correlate to XYZ outcomes for the business. And that's possibly what I would think of if I didn't have the business context and I was purely thinking of it from a product perspective. But a very interesting use case for me definitely would be in the world of advertising. Brands really struggle to identify what kind of advertising is giving them the best bang for their buck, right? I would try and delve into a problem statement there where am I able to like real time create imagery that is able to reach out to customers, and then I'm able to on the fly learn which kind of visual digital asset is having the best appeal, and then make adaptations of that, right? It's so useful today because by the time you get the design, you create a design and you implement it, it takes so much time. And that's a very strong use case because it's actually helping cost efficiencies and therefore improve your revenues because you're able to show much better digital assets. And that's a very good Gen AI use case as well.
I completely agree with that. Oh, I was actually thinking about a similar idea. So, like when Spotify released its AI music, so it can basically now generate these music, basically voices based on the data set it had. I was thinking like, can somebody do the same thing for say Instagram Reels or maybe like photos and all? And I think Instagram Meta is basically working on that. So there will be a
Yeah.
time, I think maybe near future, where people might not create content. Algorithm will like understand, okay, what is the content which people are looking and basically working
Yeah.
for them, and it can start producing because of generative AI. It's getting so good at generating
Correct.
content, and that's a very good use case which you mentioned, that now brands maybe like in any space, e-commerce, marketing, retail, they can use this for generating their campaigns, because that can be more tailored to particular say audience,
Absolutely.
and it can
Absolutely.
adapt also, like yeah, based on what is working, what is not
Correct.
working.
Like
So
your upscaling use case, right, was just so
yeah.
cool, because that was the first thing in my head, saying that, because that's the other thing, right? You've created an imagery of a certain spec size, and you want to get it into a higher dimension. You can use that upscale feature. There's so many use cases that are really cool. But yeah.
Yeah, I think this is like also a lot of people were asking me like, where can they use image generation, because a lot of people, they're not like very keen on learning this part of the cohort, and I was like, okay, like you have to think of the application. I think, and this is like a very good application for image generation, especially. So folks who are asking that question, like where they can apply image generation, this is, yeah, I think creating marketing campaigns. So initially, I think we also started our, you can say, agency side of thing because of same reason. Like when we built say the Alpha CTR, we fine-tuned this model on thumbnails, which basically worked for us on the YouTube, and we were able to like transfer the learning of whatever we had. And based on that, a lot of other media companies reached out to us by saying, okay, if
Oh,
you
that's so
can
cool.
optimize if you can optimize thumbnails, because thumbnails also track your click-through rate, right? Like the
Yeah.
better the
Yeah.
thumbnail is, the more clicks you will get. And they were like,
Correct.
okay, the same thing which this is the same metric we use for our ad campaigns. Can you actually build a model which can basically help us to like generate more good looking ad creatives? And
Yeah.
we thought, okay, let's try this, and it actually worked out well for a lot of brands. And that is
Oh,
was
wow.
basically our first, you can say, projects, and then yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
So
Yeah.
that's a
That's a fantastic use case, right? Like, I would take that product any day, right? It's so useful. There are so many things as marketers. You want to experiment with content, you want to experiment with messaging, you want to experiment with ideas, but you just don't do it because of limitations. So you then pick the best option, the shortest path to output. But here you don't have that limitation. You have the option to play around with as many as you can. I think it's a great use case.
right. One last thing which I was thinking about is, what do you think about visual experience? And what could be the impact of that? Like, so I was thinking in terms of AR, VR, as you know, like Vision Pro also got released, right?
Right.
A lot of people are trying to build this e-commerce experience
Hmm.
in that space. Like, do you have some ideas there, or like, what do you think first of
I
all about
think
the space?
I I think it's again a very, very strong space in, say, pharma, for example, and we were discussing this internally as well. And I think I might be giving away too much on the session, but so see, for example, some of our customers, they are in contact lenses, right? And there is the problem that they have in terms of um, contact lenses or spectacles. Lenskart has possibly solved it to a certain extent, but the experience is not great. It's far, far from optimal. So there are so many use cases that you can actually use this in the visual experience, not just in the very obvious fashion space, but it can be used in the pharma space. It can be used in the health space as well. And I know there is already some work being done because we also do some work around the healthcare space. There is already oncologists are primarily using it to kind of diagnose polyps, right? Which are like early stage cancer cells. So it's just so dynamic as a space. There is so many use cases that are coming in, and I think that the beauty is being able to take it and create a workflow that makes sense, and that's where the challenge is, because there are a lot of models. We have to pick the right model and make it work for you. But yeah, it's a very cool space we are in.
Do you have any other problem statement which you want to give it to students, and maybe just they can start working
Right.
on it?
I think I've given a couple of problem statements already.
Can we
So,
summarize
so,
that? Yeah.
yeah, so I'm giving problem statements that they can actually get access to data, publicly available data, right? Because some of the problem statements might need you to have access to first-party data, which might be difficult. I mean, if you do, great. But that might be a challenge. But say, you're being able to mine through reviews and ratings. And this is a very interesting use case. So I'll clarify. So let's assume you're selling a pair of sandals, right? Sada chappals, right? Now, very interestingly, what happens is the use case in a rainy season is that it is meant for rain. So you actually have to change your content on a platform. If you're doing it well, you actually go to an Amazon or a Flipkart or wherever, and you actually change your content to rain for the particular season, because then you want SEO to rank and you want products, customers will search for it and you pop up, right? And similarly, the same product during summers is then classified as beachwear, right? And somebody has to manually go and change that. So if you are today able to kind of go through reviews, ratings, and be able to dynamically optimize content on any platform. So you get this information available off of, say, Amazon or Flipkart. If you're able to make recommendations of information that should be changed on the product information on the product page, I think that's very cool. That's a very, very strong use case, which is something we are also working on. So that's a problem statement I would definitely give. Second is there could be attributes that you don't know of. So again, same example. Customer might be constantly saying that it is chafing my skin, right? Which is scrubbing against my skin as an example of that chappal. But if you are then able to pick that and then create content saying that it is an anti-chafing product, right? You're actually giving the benefit upfront without even thinking about it, but through the information that the customer is actually giving. That's also super useful. So those are some use cases that you can work off of with data that is available. And why Amazon?
Awesome.
Because you can actually pull this information very easily.
Yeah, that would
That's
be, I
right.
think, great problem statements to work on. So I hope like people who are listening, they have taken a note. I think one thing I can also add here is, like I was experimenting this with image generation. How prints work, basically like print fashion. So I was trying to like generate some prints from Midjourney and DALL-E, and I was just surprised, like they were able to like get very good quality, and like very designer patterns. So maybe I think I was thinking, can we do something like this? You remember, like there was a time where this Vista Print, these kind of
Correct.
website came into
Correct.
India
Yeah.
as customized printing on demand.
Yeah.
Maybe someone can like build a generative AI solution for them in their own website, and they can like custom print t-shirts or maybe other apparels with the generated images which they have like maybe gone through and like generated
I
from these
think
LLMs.
to add on to it, it's a great merchandising product, because today merchandisers in these large organizations struggle with ideas of what to do, right? They have a usual format of creating new designs, creating new t-shirts, etc. But imagine being able to give them inputs of what kind of prints and what kind of styles that they should be launching. That's super useful, right?
Cool. Next question is, how do we actually differentiate between real problem and assumed problems when we do not have access to in-depth industry information? I think one thing is watching these kind of sessions.
Correct. Yeah, so that's the thing, right? So you need to kind of put your problem through a framework. Actually, there's a very cool framework which is called, I think it's called the Business Canvas Problem Framework. It's pure MBA jargony. It's not B school, but it's super useful. Actually, it basically tells you who your customers are, what are the problems that you're solving for the customer. Is it going to make money? Is it actually going to save cost? Is there a long-term viabilities? You may be solving a problem only for today. And once the problem is solved, they don't need you. That could be a problem too. So you may solve a problem which has a very short shelf life. Then what do you do? So it kind of puts you have to put your idea through that framework to kind of know if it's ticking off all the boxes. And if it does, then you should go for it.
Cool. I think move to next question. Rajiv asked this. How do you think the e-commerce industry has changed over the past 10 years and where do you think it's headed?
But it's a tremendous change, right? I think if you look at it 10 years back, we were what, 1% share of e-commerce. Today we are inching towards 10%. China is about almost 40%, 40% in specific categories like FMCG. So we have a huge potential to tap into. We have a sizable chunk of internet users that are growing. So the e-commerce industry is definitely growing. It's booming, while it has gone through a certain bit of a lull in the past 1 year because of many factors. But having said that, this is the space that is any which way is going to grow. It's just common sense, right? You have more users, more people having the purchasing power, and hence they will want to buy online. And very aspirational crowd in the tier 2, tier 3 cities. So there is definitely going to be growth in the category for sure.
Cool. Thanks for the session, Sonu.
Cool.
A lot of great insights.
Thank you. Thank you so much.